Welcome back to our third session of the day. Thanks for being with us. Today we have three speakers with us. We have Dennis Jernigan, PE. Dennis is the Deputy Chief Engineer for Highway Operations with the North Carolina Turnpike Authority and is in charge of construction of Complete 540. Prior to his role, Mr. Jernigan served as NCDOT Division 5 Construction Engineer. Mr. Jernigan has over 30 years of experience with NCDOT, including roadway construction engineer for the Central Construction Unit, Division 4 resident engineer, and assistant resident engineer in Division 6 and 8. Mr. Jernigan holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from North Carolina State University and is a licensed professional engineer and a certified public manager. Daniel Bridges, PE, DBIA. Daniel is a graduate of NC State University and has 27 years of experience, all with WSP. He has spent the majority of his career as a project manager focused on the management of alternative delivery projects. Recently, Daniel was named the WSP Southern States District Transportation Business Line Leader. He served as PM for the Triangle Expressway Southeast Extension in Raleigh during the pursuit phase and through the approval of final roadway plans. When not at work, Daniel enjoys time with his family and church, watching his children play soccer and doing construction projects around the house. Holly Christianberry, PE. Holly is a graduate of UNC Charlotte and NC State and serves as a lead transportation engineer for WSP. She has over 10 years of experience in transportation, including bridge inspection, drainage, and roadway design. Holly is the DSDC manager for construction services on the Triangle Expressway Southeast Extension R2828 project. She is a licensed professional engineer, a PENC Leadership Institute alumni, and outside of work enjoys time with friends, family, and church outreach. Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm going to start showing the NC 540 project here. This is a fantastic project that we partnered with NCTA with. We also had a contractor partner, a JV partner of Lane Construction and Blythe Construction. And so we're going to go through some of the highlights of the project, the challenges that we've faced along the way, and just show you some updated construction photos. So hope you enjoy the presentation. So that was what we call the sizzle reel, just to get you guys excited about the project. We just had an introduction of ourselves, so we won't spend any time on that particular item. But as we get started here, I'd like to turn it over to Dennis to go through the 540 projects in more detail.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me? Just get the thumbs up for make sure I'm not talking to myself. Okay, good. It's unfortunate that the sizzle reel, there's actually some very peppy music that typically goes along with that. So sorry you didn't get to hear that this morning. But this is a diagram to show that phase one is actually made up of 3 different projects. And phase one is the piece of 540 that is currently under construction. So we have the first piece. If you'll notice on the bottom, we have our step designations on the bottom of this screen, the R2721A and B, and then the R2828. And we'll spend the most time today talking about R2828 as Holly and Daniel are associated with that particular project. But the A job extends from NC 55, where the current Triangle Expressway ends, over to Pierce Olive, just east of Pierce Olive. And then the B job extends from there to just east of US 401, almost to Fanny Brown. And then the R2828, the large project, extends from Fanny Brown over to I-40. And then you don't see phase 2 on here, but phase 2 actually will complete the loop around Raleigh, the 540 loop, and it'll extend between the R2828 limits and I-87. On the bottom right, you see 7 new interchanges that are shown by circles and listed in addition to being shown on the map. And we actually let these projects from east to west, even though the existing facility terminates on the west end. And we did that because our preliminary design consultant completed right-of-way plans for the A and the B job. And we actually started right-of-way acquisition on those jobs as more of a hybrid design build before the 2828 job, which was a traditional design build where right-of-way is actually part of that contract. So we let the 2828 project first to give the design and right away a chance to catch up to A and B, and we went from east to west. And our goal is to open all 3 projects at the same time. We're currently on track to do that. Completion percentages range between 47% and 51%. We also staggered the lettings for the project, and that helped the industry be able to evaluate whether or not they wanted to, if they weren't successful on one of the bids, they could either decide to go after another bid more aggressively, or if they were successful, then they could make that decision of, do I have enough? Can I handle any more work, or am I pretty much peaked out? So we staggered the lettings for that purpose as well. And then to share the pavement love with the industry, 2828 is paved with concrete pavement, and 2721 both are being paved with asphalt. So on the next slide, you're going to see, Daniel mentioned that the 2828 project is a joint venture. We actually had joint ventures on all 3 projects. Daniel already mentioned Lane Blythe with WSP as the lead designer on 2828. The A and the B job for a joint venture with Branch Civil and Flatiron both got both the A and the B job, but they had a lead designer again at Fleming on the A and HDR on the B job. You see the contract costs here. We reviewed over 1,000 submittals on these 3 projects. We have 95 subcontractors, over 400 pieces of equipment. And we did have some bad weather in 2020. We are trying to work to make that up. But our design also coordinated with local governments and Wade County for bicycle pedestrian infrastructure accommodations. So the next slide is actually going to show you a snip of the 2828 project more highlighted. It's the longest and largest project at 8.6 miles. New interchanges are being built at Old Stage Road, NC 50, and the big interchange, which you'll hear about a couple of times through this presentation, at I-40 and US 70. And then on the next slide, again, it's a little bit more detail about our 2828. And I mentioned it's located from east of 401 to I-40. It's a new location. The entire project is a new location, 6-lane, fully tolled facility, all electronic tolling, no toll booths, which a lot of people in the industry who were toll collecting through those booths, they're switching to all electronic anyway because of the pandemic and toll collection. But the key design features include 9 culverts, 29 bridges, 2 service interchanges, and an innovative system-to-system interchange. It's a 5-legged turbine-style interchange at I-40, US 70, and NC 540. You see that on the right. It was nicknamed the Dream Catcher before I came on board. I think it looks like a starfish, but that had already been decided, so I lost that. But in the design year, by 2045, there will be almost 200,000 vehicles using those 3 facilities. So it had to have something really innovative to handle that traffic and handle it efficiently. And then Daniel's now going to share some of WSP's roles on our 2828.
Yeah, so WSP served as the lead design consultant. As we said, we had some key sub-consultants that were splitting the project with us in certain geographies, with certain disciplines. And so all of our partners helped to get a number of submittals that Dennis mentioned, over 1,000 for the 3 projects. Certainly there were a significant number of submittals for our piece. And some of those, the major crossings that you can see here from a stream crossing perspective, we had the Juniper Branch bridges, which we're going to show you some updated photos of. There were a number of Swift Creek bridges. There was a Swift Creek proper crossing, and then there's also a Swift Creek tributary that had some long bridges, and that was a very environmentally sensitive area. So what we're going to end up going into next is some of the challenges that were presented along the way. Holly's going to come in and talk about some of these items with you. Of course, on every major design and construction project, there's always some challenges that the design team has to be able to overcome, and at working with the owner and working with the contractor partners. And that's something that certainly we have done very well in this project, to partner with all of those folks and come up with good solutions to move forward. And some of those areas that we're going to talk about today in more detail: right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, which was a significant piece of this project, constructability issues, the watershed, as I just said, at Swift Creek, some permit sites, and then just overall coordination among all the other projects and activities going on in the area during the time of construction and design and permitting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Holly.
Thanks, Daniel. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
So on the screen here, the main thing I want to show is the NCDOT preliminary design, shown here in green and red. And as Dennis mentioned, they used to call it the Dream Catcher. It's a 3-level turbine with NC 540 on the top level, US 70, and then underneath is I-40 running north to south. And you can barely see it on this screen, but we'll show it a little better on the next one, the LBJV design in gray underneath. The turbine includes coordination with another contracting team in the reconstruction of I-40, which is part of a separate and ongoing NCDOT project. With I-40 running through the heart of the turbine, there were 7 bridge conflicts to consider. WSP designed all the ramp alignments within the turbine, which made project coordination a major component to the success of both of these projects. And on the next slide, we'll show you a little bit more about what WSP came up with in the design. So there were a total of 18 ATCs for this project, with ATC 13 being chosen in the final turbine concept. This concept was a 2-level turbine instead of 3. By eliminating the US 70 bridges, instead of taking US 70 on the existing bridges, we were able to put it right on the turbine. This definitely simplified our concept. We also were able to eliminate 3 proposed bridges and 2 existing bridges for a total of 112,000 square feet of bridge deck reduction. Commitments of the ATC also included separation of toll and non-toll NC 540 facilities. And on this slide, I just want to point out the exact location of those US 70 bridges. It's the focal point of where I-40, US 70, and NC 540 meet. So again, by eliminating these bridges, we were able to simplify that design in the 3rd level of the turbine, making it a 2-level turbine. On the next slide, we will be talking a little bit about more of the reductions that we were able to come up with. We were able to eliminate approximately 4.5 acres by moving that ramp into the footprint of the turbine. We also, again, were able to eliminate the 3rd level structures by putting NC 540 on the 2nd level. So that improved the grade from 4% to 2.4%. Our concept also reduced wetland impacts by combining the 2 ramps at the bottom of the screen there in the southwest quadrant. This also reduced some construction costs, of course. Again, we were able to also eliminate another quite substantial US 70 bridge that crossed Swift Creek off to the right of the page there. In addition to eliminating that structure, we looked at traffic patterns, not only the final traffic patterns, but we wanted to consider the maintenance of traffic during construction. So we had to widen one of our structures to maintain traffic during construction, as well as a future ramp. We widened this bridge to include that future design of that ramp. And as you all know, with any new location project of this size, earthwork became a big and major factor, a major objective. We spent countless hours putting into balancing the job. And at the end of the day, this project required these 5 borrow sites that you can see on your screen here. There was a total of about 2 million square yards of cubic yards, excuse me, of dirt needed in the turbine. And by using these borrow sites, we were able to balance the job. All these sites were in with the right-of-way limits, so we were able to, again, maintain right-of-way, and we were also able to use our proposed structures to haul the material across I-40 during construction. And obviously, these efforts are still ongoing. And at this point, I'll toss it back to Dennis to discuss some more important aspects of the right-of-way process.
So I mentioned earlier that right-of-way was acquired through different means on the corridor, but both were affected by the same factors. And I had mentioned earlier that the R2828 was a traditional design build where the right-of-way was actually part of the scope. And then the 2721 A and B, we actually let turnkey projects with the exception of surveying. Surveying had to be a limited services contract. But aside from that, you typically have your right-of-way components, you have your appraisals, acquisition, demos, all of it is separate, but we actually compiled it into one. And so by doing that and letting that, we actually had a DBE prime on the B job, and he was also a sub on the A job. And doing so allowed us to add over $5 million of work that went to DBE and small business firms in the corridor. But one of the types of challenges of right-of-way impact was MAP Act claims. And I know a lot of people have heard about MAP Act claims. And just in case you don't know specifically what it is, I'll give you a brief background. So in 1987, the North Carolina General Assembly passed the Corridor Protection Act. And that was an effort to keep the cost of land reasonable and prevent development until the project was ready for construction. Good thought. North Carolina was not unique in that thought. There were about a dozen states that had that kind of law in place. But in 2016, a group of property owners in Forsyth County sued NCDOT all the way to the North Carolina Supreme Court. And the court ruled that the law was unfair and unconstitutional as the owners had not been compensated for something that had been taken. So in 2019, the General Assembly repealed the MAP Act with House Bill 131. And in May 2020, the Supreme Court, North Carolina Supreme Court, issued a ruling in a court case, Chappell versus NCDOT, where DOT had appealed some of the decisions in the case that the Chappells filed in 2014. Now, one of the issues that was a MAP Act specific issue, big issue, is whether NCDOT retained its condemnation or quick take rights. And since that was an outstanding issue through the early part of these projects, access to some of the MAP Act parcels took time to obtain access because we didn't file condemnation. And the second big issue that affected the right-of-way was the pandemic. We all know about the pandemic. But the courthouse is closed, so we couldn't file condemnations. We couldn't record settlements. Wake County went to an e-record system. And people on both sides, both the DOT side the acquisition firms as well as the owners, they were hesitant to meet people face to face. And I'm sure we all remember that period when everybody was talking about how COVID could be transmitted so easily and everybody was scared. But then when we actually did acquire right of way and we had to relocate people, the governor issued a stay at home directive. And so DOT rightfully decided to not enforce vacate notices during a pandemic. We had the legal right to do that, but it wouldn't go so well to tell somebody you've got to get out of your house when the governor says stay at home. So of course we had to suspend those vacate notices. Now people could elect to relocate and some did, but some elected to stay until things kind of calmed down and the numbers came back down. There were about 187 parcels on R2828. There were about 650 for the corridor. And what you see on the slide now are two areas where the contractor was working as much as he could in anticipation of getting access, but again, because the MAP Act affects here on the left photo, what you see, he had to have access to a MAP Act parcel to build the wing wall on that particular culvert. And you see the blue areas where the wing wall was going to go. But he couldn't finish the culvert because we had a delayed entry in getting to the MAP Act parcel. And then on the right, it looks like a bridge to nowhere. The bridge actually continued into that wooded area, but the parcel wasn't yet available. So he worked as much as he could until we were able to get access. So on the next screen, what you're going to see, and I think there's a video, it's actually a tool that one of our young people developed to assist citizens. And as it plays, I'll kind of narrate. We have a mapping tool on the project website where somebody can enter an address, and the tool shows the proximity to the project, but you had to have Google Earth, and that's what we had originally. But anybody with browser access can run this tool. So the color codes are the different municipal boundaries. It started with a disclaimer, which we've already passed. You'll see here an address is being entered. And once that address is entered, the map will zoom to that particular location. And what you will see here is the right of way is in different colors. If you've got controlled access versus your standard right of way, you see how it's color coded. And one of the features is a measuring tool. So what you're going to see in the video now is we're going to switch over to Wake Tech. We're going to go over to where Wake Tech is, and they're going to measure the distance from the entrance to Wake Tech to the controlled access. And you can see how on the top left, you will see them access the measuring tool. You choose what units you want to measure and then draw a line, just like most other measuring tools on the website, on a website. And so this is very helpful. It's very user friendly. It's a whole lot easier than some of the other tools we've used in the past. But again, it's available on our website. If you want to play with it, look at it. If you want to use this for one of your projects at some point in the future. But then the next screen is going to be a shot from Wake IMAPS or Wake GIS. There we go. Our preliminary design consultant, H.W. Lochner, worked with Wake GIS to show the project corridor on IMAPs as a level that could be turned on or off. It wasn't automatically on, you had to elect to turn it on. And the study corridor was about 1,000 feet wide in most places, and you see it's not the case here. And I'll tell you why, but it's shown in the fuchsia color. And so what that allowed people to do is to kind of get an idea of whether they were inside the corridor, outside the corridor, adjacent to the corridor, that kind of thing. But once we got close to having the right of way, we provided new files as we acquired property to Wake GIS, and they refined that corridor to match the right of way limits. And that's why you don't see that 1,000-foot wide rectangle going through there, because we actually had them pull it in as we purchased right of way. And once we got through acquiring right of way, they actually turned that layer off. So if you go looking for it now, you're not going to see it, but we have asked them to turn it back on for phase 2, and we're providing files for them to turn it back on. We felt like it was a useful tool for phase 2. The green that you see here are utility transmission lines. The top one is Colonial Pipeline. And Daniel mentioned a pretty significant effort in the corridor. And they were one of the biggest pipeline or biggest utility relocations ever on a DOT project. We originally had 8 conflicts, designed one out pre-bid. The one you see in the middle of this screen is about 8,000 feet. That's a significant effort to relocate out 8,000 feet of pipeline. And then on the bottom right is actually Cardinal Williams. It's a different company, but we had a pipeline there that crossed Holland Church Road, as did Duke Transmission, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide. So this is Holland Church Road when it pops up here. Here we go. And you'll notice it is closed to traffic. At this location, there was a conflict with an overhead Duke transmission line, and that's Holland Church in black. And we had a conflict with a Duke overhead transmission line, which will show up here in red. We also had Cardinal Williams, which is shown in green. And the alignment, which you'll see animate here, was in white. So you see we had a pretty significant conflict with 2 major transmission lines. So we relocated Duke, as you're going to see here in yellow. We relocated Cardinal, as you see here in light orange. And then the purple arrow that you see there, the one on the left, is the approximate approach embankment that had to be placed for a specified period of time. There were compressive soils here, and so Cardinal Williams determined that they were going to have extra stress on the pipeline if they placed it before these soils settled out. And we would normally not typically purchase easements for utility transmission facilities. They don't like for us to do that. But the properties on the east and west side of Holland Church Road were map-back parcels, and the owners council didn't want to negotiate with all these separate entities. So they said, we're only going to talk to one group. So we actually had to go out and negotiate and purchase the transmission facilities for both these companies. Now that purple arrow on the right is actually where in the relocation process, these parties, the Duke and Cardinal Williams, crossed. They actually shared the same space, one aerial, one underground, and they both wanted the underlying right to the easement. So that was another thing that kind of complicated this area. Let's see, what's on the next slide, Daniel?
Yeah, so this is the noise walls. So noise walls were a big part of this project. There's noise walls as we traverse back behind some neighborhoods. The noise walls had some very aesthetic features to them. One of them was that there was a bid alternate, I guess, that was for all brick. And, you know, our team did choose the all brick component. You can see on the far right there is part of that construction of the noise walls where, I mean, there's brick masons out there putting up those brick walls, even still doing so today. But there are overlaps for maintenance and access areas. There's noise walls in a variety of areas, including on some of the bridges. So it was a pretty extensive analysis that went on to take that TNR from the pursuit and get it into the DNR, and then the balloting that went out to all the different neighborhoods. And so a lot of we're going to have some construction photos later where you'll see a lot of these noise walls are already being constructed out there right now. Another significant part of what we were doing is the permitting. This particular shots were in Swift Creek, where there were some endangered species and they had to be relocated. And so our partners, Three Oaks, were out there in dive suits moving those mussels. And of course, we had to be out there just to document it. But that was a big part of that. Before we could do any work in Swift Creek, those mussels had to be relocated. And I think Holly, you're going to pick up with this particular slide.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So some other, again, I think we've mentioned it earlier, but the coordination in the turbine with the I-5111 team of I-40 was a major component of this project. And some of the challenges, I'll walk through some of these with you. The overlapping areas, obviously with US 70, NC 540 and I-40 coming together. These areas included permitting, drainage, roadway design, and a host of construction activities. We also had to navigate 3 datum descriptions during design. And I'm sure the designers out there know how fun that can be. Plan preparation also became quite an interesting feat and a fun endeavor, as shown here in the figure. Typically with roadway plans, we're used to seeing black and white, but we felt that adding the multitude of colors that you see here would help the contractors denote who was building what. So we added some color to our plans. Another thing that we did and made sure that we did throughout the design and now through the construction phase is holding several coordination meetings to ensure that constructability concerns were caught early on. So that was just another part of the project and growing pains with multiple contractors and multiple design teams.
So this slide summarizes some of our outreach efforts. Only since the pandemic began, we were already meeting on site with residents and neighbors before the pandemic, and those are not in these particular numbers. We like talking to people directly about the project. The only way they're going to get the correct information is to get it directly from us. You know what happens when a friend tells a friend. And so we have had a robust public information campaign out here. So since the pandemic began, we've had over 1,800 participants in 54 meetings. And although some of the meetings are going back to in person, we still have virtual meetings booked into next year. We've sent out over 16,000 postcards, made 43 next door posts. And we try to tailor these to the areas of the project where certain activities will occur or where work will occur for the first time. Power driving, anything that makes noise, things like that, to let people know what to expect. We don't like people to be surprised. And we responded to almost 1,000 emails and phone calls last year and over 1,900 this year. And that's a pace of communicating with over 5.5 people per day. And that number does not include people who either reach out directly to us, or if we've already dealt with them and they want to have, if they have follow-up questions, those are not even included here. So we have a lot of communications with folks along the corridor. And the next slide shows some of the partners with whom we maintain communications. Of course, our federal agencies, there really wasn't a lot of business in the corridor as far as right-of-way acquisition. It was mostly residential, but residents and HOAs, I just mentioned emergency services. Anytime we have any kind of detour, be it permanent, or if we're closing down roads, opening new roads, that's one of our communications, mapping services, things of that nature. Okay, on our next slide, you're going to see a couple of resources that are available on our project website. And the one on the top left is an interactive map. So what you see a line of drums that are along the bottom. So anytime major work occurs in an area on the project, we put a drum in here. And if somebody goes to this website and clicks on one of those drums, a pop-up box opens on the left side of the screen. It shows you what activity is occurring at that location, how long it's expected to last. And you can also click in the top right. I know it's hard to see on this slide, but it says show my location. So if you click that, it actually drops a pin on the map from wherever you're checking it from. So if folks along the corridor are checking it, they can actually see their proximity to a certain location on the project. But we average more than 75 people per day to use this map. A lot of folks are checking this to see what's going on, and that's over 27,000 views a year. And on the bottom right, one of the biggest questions you always get from citizens along the corridor, am I going to get a noise wall? So we went ahead and put something on the website, on the project webpage, to let people know they can go there and look. If they don't get their questions answered, of course, they can reach back out to us. We have dedicated email address and 800 number. But this is available for all 3 projects, as all 3 DNRs have been approved, and balloting is complete on the 2828 and the B job, and we're now balloting on the A job. But this shows by color code, if it's green, it shows that a wall has been approved, it has been balloted, and gives some of the details. If it's blue, then it's been voted down. The balloting showed that people did not accept the wall. I will tell you, we have not had any walls that have not been approved. Didn't expect any. So everything's been green thus far. Okay.
So one of the other tools that we developed at WSP to help the public, understand the project was this WSP web app that you can get to through the NCTA project site. But on this web app, we have an interactive 3D, rendering of the project. It has a lot of features to it. It allows you to go to any of the particular areas along the project to see the renderings. We've tried to put in as much detail as we could related to the noise walls and the signing and just the features of the project. It's got some areas where you can click on the little icon that has a lowercase I in it, and it'll give you information about that particular area, about whether it's real brick or the aesthetic features or something interesting about the project. It's also got the ability to look at it from an aerial perspective, and you can see in the middle photo here that you can click on any of those areas and it'll let you go to those particular areas and show a 360 view of what you would see from that particular area. So it's pretty interesting that you can get to a lot of the different areas on the project and see what they will look like when it's complete. And then on the far right, you can just see it's just another area that's in the turbine area of one of those areas you can look at. There's also got some other features like the swipe feature, which I like a lot because as you can see, starting on the left side here, that's the existing interchange with US 70 that's there now. And then on the far right is kind of the ultimate. And I've just put some progress photos in there in the middle where you have that swipe feature and you can kind of see where it was, just virgin forest. And then now it's going to be part of the transportation network moving forward. And you can kind of see that progress in any portion along the project. So it's a very useful tool. We've also gone in there in a lot of cases and tried to update it with construction photos. So at some locations, you can go in there and see actual progress photos along the way of that particular element, be it a bridge or some of the roadway pieces. And so it's just something that provides a tool for the public during construction. We have some progress photos now that we've tried to update, and we did get some more just last week. So some of those are in here now. I mean, you guys know it's a new location project, so there's a lot of grading that's been going on at this point. Dennis talked about some of the rain and different things, but there has been quite a bit of work being performed out there. I'm going to progress through these and just talk a little bit about them, but Holly and Dennis, feel free to add any color commentary you may have. This particular photo is kind of on the west of the project. That's Fanny Brown is what you see on the left side of the screen there, and you can see that the proposed bridge is being built. We've got an on-site detour established, and this photo is a dated photo where we put in the on-site detour. You can see some utility lines there in the area, but on the right side is where the old roadway was. It has been removed there for the on-site detour, and then now this is how it looks today. This is now been put back in operation. The striping's on the bridge. They're back on the new roadway that's been constructed in the new bridge, and you can see they've removed part of that on-site detour there. This is the Juniper Branch Bridges. This is a dated photo here from earlier in construction. This was one of our ATCs on the project where we proposed a radial bridge concept, meaning that our bridge abutments weren't at the same location. You can see that on the north, on the top side of this photo, where the bridge ends kind of have differing starting and ending points. And that was to reduce the structure size while also helping to still avoid all the wetlands in this area. And here's
Sorry, we're getting some feedback. Dennis, can you mute yourself while you're not talking? Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yep, thanks. You can see this a little bit clearer in this photo, which is a top-down, more recent view of Juniper Branch Bridges and that radial concept on the top part there. But that was something where we were able to, the reason it was an ATC was because the RFP said that the bridges had to be the same location and length as shown in the indicative design, and so we were able to submit an ATC to shave some costs there and still provide the benefit for the environment. And Dennis, if you want to unmute, I can start talking anytime you want to add anything on any of these.
No, you're doing a great job, Daniel. And one of the concerns we had when the team first asked about making one of these bridges longer than the other was you would have ended up with a retaining wall between the two bridges. So from a maintenance standpoint, that was problematic. It was a concern for us. And then from an aesthetic standpoint, you don't typically see a lot of locations where you have one bridge shorter than the other. So it was an innovative proposal by the team. It was a good solution. They were able to shave 51 feet of length off one of the bridges.
So Holland Church, this is the sequence where Dennis just walked through the utilities that were out there. So you can kind of see that Holland Church Road is moving from the bottom left to the top right. You can see the overhead Duke transmission lines that are crisscrossing across the alignment on the upper side of the photo, and then coming back down towards the bottom right. You can see that the Holland Church Road bridge is now being constructed there, and all these utilities were crisscrossing right in the footprint of the bridge. What you don't see here is the gas pipeline that's also been relocated because it's underground. But Dennis mentioned that there was a fill area that had to be placed over the cardinal line so that they could get the settlement and stuff on it, and that's where you see that seating area on the slopes there on the top part of the photo. But this is a very good in-progress photo of all that utility coordination that went on in this location. I probably should have put this, Dennis, right after you illustrated that, and that would have been more clear.
But if you look on the tower in the middle of the photo on the left, and then the bottom right, you can if you imagine the line between those two, that's where the original line went. So you can see that it literally crossed the interior bent directly overhead.
Yeah, he's talking about right through here. All right. This is an earlier photo of the Swift Creek temporary trestle. So this is at our what we call Bridge 9. We use the trestle to stay out of the wetlands. You can see that the fingers of the wetland of the trestle being built here. This is long before a lot of the construction was underway, but you can see the access road and different things in this area. And then the next photo here shows a more recent photo where one of the bridges has already been constructed and is being progressed. And on the right side, you can see the fingers of those trestles are there for each of those bents, and you can kind of see if you zoom in on there each of the piers being constructed and a couple of girders being hung. So that's still in progress out there at bridge number 9.
Another thing I was just going to add, Daniel, on this is some grading also had to be done just under these bridges with the profile and the way that the grade worked here. Another fun activity that we did in coordination with permitting was getting a grade not only for the proposed alignments but underneath the bridges as well.
Yep. And then this is one hot off the press. This came from our aerial photos we got last week. This is Swift Creek. So this is the main Swift Creek crossing. You can see in this photo the actual stream is on the right side there. And this is the temporary trestle being constructed where they're out there beginning to start with those there's dual bridges in that area as well. And this is where the muscle relocation was occurring in this area. We talked about just the grading on a mass job of this size. We talked about the noise walls. You can see in this photo here where the mainline grading is occurring, the noise walls are being constructed to the outside. You can see some of those neighborhoods that we're kind of crossing behind, and just some of the scale, the width of this particular job, and that kind of thing. So, I mean, one of the things that the contract was trying to do is get the noise walls up to kind of help with noise during construction. There's still a lot of activities to be done on this section, but it's just a good progress photo of what's going on out there. So here's the turbine. I mean, this is so neat and so interesting to see. I put the inset of what it's supposed to look like when it's done down in the bottom left, but you can actually see the turbine starting, or the turbine starting to take shape here. You know, you can see some of the ramps taking shape in the circular feature. Holly mentioned that some of our bridges over I-40 were widened to help with construction, that we're using them for hauling. So just to orient you to this picture, the going left to right on the screen is I-40, and then US 70 is what's coming up from the bottom and then crosses, and that's the existing interchange there with US 70. So those bridges right in the middle of the picture are what's being removed once US 70 gets removed. And just to the left of those US 70 bridges, you can see the abutment for the mainline 540 bridges being constructed right there. And we're going to show you some more pictures of these three bridges over here. These are kind of three critical bridges, but you can see the hauling being done across there. We did a lot of analysis on those bridges to make sure that they would carry the loadings that would be on there from a hauling operation of this size, and so a lot of analysis went into that particular area. And as you can see, this whole area is kind of being worked on in some fashion. This is where a lot of our bar sites were coming from, and things of that nature.
And Daniel, just to give a magnitude of this particular interchange, it takes up 481 acres. There's 37 acres of pavement, and from the bridge you see on the left to the one they will cross on the right, it's 5/8 of a mile from the northernmost bridge to the southernmost bridge, and 6 of the bridges in the interchange cross I-40, which you can see in that rendering in the bottom left. And Holly and Daniel can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I believe I recall 13 bridges in this particular interchange.
Yeah, that's all right. So you've got the three bridges. Holly mentioned it earlier that there's 7 bridges that cross I-40. So we mentioned there was another construction job going on, I-5111, a lot of coordination there. But here's 3 of them that are built here. There's dual bridges here at the main line, 3, 4, 5, and then there's the other part of the turbines coming right here. You can see part of that bridge being constructed right there. And then off the screen, there's another bridge just a little bit further off the screen there that's also now constructed over I-40. Here's another, excuse me, another view of that interchange. This one does capture that bridge I was talking about. And so you can see here a little bit bigger scale of all that's going on. And one of the next steps will be to when we remove these US 70 bridges, to get some traffic from US 70 on parts of the turbine. That's why you're seeing some pavement being put in this area, and there'll be some two-way traffic being put on one of these bridges over here as well. And this is the area that we were talking about with those 3 bridges. You can see they've put some material on the bridges so they could haul across those. And this one is the one that was widened to allow for some, you know, this is a turbine, so everything goes in one direction. Well, we're actually going to use one of those bridges as bi-directional during our temporary traffic phasing. And there's some of the equipment that's going across those new bridges as we haul back and forth across over I-40. We did have a little fun while we were out there. We had a little party when they hung the first girders over I-40. Some of our team was out there just to watch that construction late at night. It was you know, a big milestone for the project. It was interesting to see that happen. So we had a lot of fun with that. There are some aesthetic features that we've talked about along the way, not only just the noise walls. You can kind of see it down here on this bridge that's being constructed here, but there will be brick, real brick on these abutment areas. The median piers had some artistic features there, and there's the dogwood emblem that's on the pier caps too. This is you, Dennis.
Okay, it just came up. Thank you, Daniel. So one of the things unique to this project too is we had an archaeological site. And in this particular site, it was between Holland Church Road and Sauls Road, and materials there dated back to the Archaic period. We found projectile points and Middle Woodland period. Pottery was recovered during those excavations. So you actually had 2 different periods, and they dated from between 8,000 BC and 800 AD. So what you see here is what archaeologists think was a gorget. and it was probably used as a personal piece of jewelry, an adornment that went around the neck. It was hung around somebody's neck. There was a WTVD story on that. If anybody wants to see that, it actually shows some of the artifacts, and we have pictures and things like that. In more detail, if anybody wants to see those afterwards and lets me know, I'll try and get you some information on those. Okay. The project has been featured in 3 different publications. And if you see on the right there, Roads and Bridges, we actually made the cover. You see there an early photo of the radial bridges that Daniel covered earlier. So it's an honor to be in Roads and Bridges. It's a national publication. I'm sure everybody on this call knows about it, but to make the cover was especially a big deal. So we've appreciated that. What's in the middle there is HNTB is Turnpike's GEC, and they have a national publication called Think. And so they actually did a feature on our efforts to offer diversity with the industry as well as our neighbors, our new neighbors along the project. And so they did a feature on that. And Roger Rochelle and I, Roger, for those of you know, he was chief engineer. He retired last week at the Turnpike Authority, but he and I were featured in that article. And then the one on the left, civil and structural engineer, was one of the first articles on the project, and Roger had a byline article on that particular one. So projects got, in addition to the outreach campaign, there's been a lot of coverage nationally for this particular project and some of its innovations and efforts. And
going along with that same thing, trying to get some coverage out there, we did partner with NCTA to put out a piece on the diversity of our design team, and then also on the efforts from the Turnpike Authority. So Roger Rochelle had a small clip in that where he talked about that, and then we showcased our diverse team that led the project. So Raniel Thigpen is our design project manager right now, and we just had a lot of things that were interesting in there, what it meant to you, to each of these people, to be on a project of this size and to have a leadership role, and just some cool little fun things that we did to talk about the opportunities that this project presented for us. So that was put on LinkedIn a number of months ago. I think there was 2 different segments. One was a shorter segment, and then we had a longer one which featured a little bit more of people's conversations.
And as we're drawing to a close here, there was a lot of unique things about this project. We had a DBE industry forum as well as an industry forum during the procurement stage, early on in the procurement stage. We shared a lot of information with the industry about how we're going to let it, when we're going to let it. We brought some of the utility owners in to go over the status of their relocations. We had started some of that early, shared information on our advanced right-of-way acquisition efforts. And we targeted at least $75 million for minority and small businesses on this project. And we achieved that with the 3 project lettings. And then, of course, I mentioned the right-of-way contracts. We actually added over $5 million more. So it was very successful in that regard as far as meeting our minority and DBE goals. We had one of our relocatees there was a beehive in the house. The agent came to me and said, "We've got a unique situation here. What do you want to do about it?" And I said, "Well, the pollinator population's in decline." So we actually brought a beekeeper out there to help us to relocate that hive. He was actually very happy to go out there and get it. Before we did some of the clearing on the project, we worked with the North Carolina Native Plant Society to allow them to relocate endangered plants. And what they do is they come out on Saturdays, they have volunteers, and they come out and look for threatened and endangered plants, and they relocate them. They transplant them back to other locations where they can be preserved. Daniel and Holly both mentioned the mussel propagation or the mussel relocations. We actually have funded a mussel propagation facility where they can be grown and put back in the environment. The next bullet, I mentioned the artifacts that go back as far as 10,000 years ago. Before we tore some of the houses down that had to be demoed, we actually let local law enforcement go out there and practice some of their home penetrations as far as if you had like a hostage situation or that kind of thing. So they actually did some of their training out there before we demoed some of those houses. We mentioned the turbine style interchange. We call it turbine style because turbine is typically the intersection of 2 routes and we have 3. So we call it turbine style. And one of the great things about working on a project like this is you get to give people time back in their lives, and who couldn't use more of that, right? But it's always, in addition to the uniqueness, you never know what you're going to see. You come out there on a Saturday morning and you see this coming down the road, and our contractor says this gives new definition to the term mobile home. And you see on the left side there, they actually had to do a lot of clearing along the right of way just to get this house down the road. But with that, I know we're running short on time, and so Dan, on behalf of Daniel and Holly, we thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. And if there are any questions, Katie, we'll be glad to try and squeeze those in.
Great, we've got several, so we'll get to as many as we can. The first one is the existing turbine interchange at I-485 and I-85 in Charlotte is really working well. However, the interchange curves are somewhat sharp and really need continuous speed limit signs since there are always offensive drivers. Besides speed limit signs, is there any other way to slow down traffic in these turbine interchange curves?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that we tried to do what we can in the design of these facilities to make sure that people were aware of what they're entering into. I think part of it is just an education as people start to use the facilities a little bit more, same as the roundabout started being introduced more in North Carolina. But we had a pretty extensive signing program with this one to help people be alerted to not only the safety of the facility, but also where they're going, because this is a brand new concept. As Dennis said, this has not only 2 facilities, but 3 entering and exiting. So there were a lot of destination signing to it. So we tried to incorporate all those features into it as much as we can. But other than signing and some pavement markings, you know, there's not a whole lot we can do except for educating them on the type of facility they're using.
Okay. The 70 I-40 West merge has been a problem for a long time. How does this design address that constant congestion?
Yeah, I mean, we saw obviously where the traffic was coming from in the projections, and that was one of the things that we had to prove to NCTA with our ATC was show where those vehicles were going, how they were going to get in the facility, how they're exiting the facility. We also, as Holly mentioned, had to make sure that we were keeping the people who were using the toll facility versus the general public separate in different ramps. So, I mean, we used the traffic projections that we had and made sure that we worked with NCTA to get the number of lanes so that we could justify the movements that were there, and just work with the DOT to get that through the process.
Okay. Do you utilize drones to help with inspection and progress reports?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dennis can talk about NCTA. They're using some drones out there too. We are using them more, so he can talk about from the inspection side. From our side, we're using them for some of the progress photos. We're using them to collect some really just general data on the project. I know the contractors out there regularly on a regular schedule where they're getting drone photos too, but we're using them in a number of ways. But Dennis, you may talk about what Summit's doing out there.
Yeah, we're not using them per se for inspection purposes, but like Daniel said, for recording the project on a monthly basis, and then for communication and marketing, we're using that a lot, but not per se directly for inspection.
Okay. What is your vegetation management / recycling plan given all the clearing for these projects?
So there was no open burning allowed. Everything, a lot of it was ground up and chipped up. As a matter of fact, because of some of our delays, some of the piles, we got some complaints because the piles stayed there for a while, but they were using those in landscaping applications and things of that nature. So from a clearing standpoint, we used them in that regard. We actually had Habitat for Humanity come out to a house or two to try and recover some items that they could use. Just with the fact that the law enforcement coming out there, the Native Plant Society. So we tried any way we could get the maximum use of anything that was going to be disturbed on the project. We tried to find a way to do that.
Okay. Some questions about the artifacts. Can you provide more information about the artifacts, and do the artifacts go into the North Carolina museum system for the public to see?
That's the intent. We had a subcontractor out of Tarboro that processed those artifacts for us. And because they were recovered during the pandemic, it was actually a little bit slow, but we have had a chance to put those on display for some of the board meetings downtown for both the DOT board and the Turnpike board, and invited folks to come in and take a look at them. But yes, in the end, once they have been processed and recorded, they will go into the North Carolina Museum system. Yes.
Great. Can you provide some more information about the mussel relocation effort?
As you
So-
saw from the photos, they were divers out there. I know WSP also came and kind of enjoyed learning more about it, but they would literally go underwater with full suit and try to locate as many of these mussels and relocate them. Dennis, I don't know if you have anything to add. I didn't get to go personally, but from the folks who did go, I heard it was a pretty interesting endeavor.
And in addition to that, in an effort to preserve these mussels, I mentioned the propagation facility. So I'm sure most everybody knows that this project was subject to litigation. And so we actually worked with SCLC to resolve the concerns and address those concerns. And as part of the settlement, one of the things we agreed to was to fund for a specified amount of time a mussel propagation facility where these mussels would be grown, and so the numbers could be improved and added to when those mussels were relocated back to the environment after they had reached a certain age. So it was kind of a twofold effort there: relocate the ones that are there and help grow new ones.
Okay, what is the schedule for completion of the entire loop?
So right now, our target was late 2023. One of the projects right now is actually sliding into early 2024. We're in conversations with the contractor about possible ways he might could pull that back. He's not necessarily optimistic. So right now, we're probably looking at opening sometime in early 24.
Okay. Last question. Are there any publications or write-ups about the artifacts and the mussel relocation?
The only thing that we have, there's not one that's been published. We do have a little bit of a write-up that the archaeology unit, NCDOT has an archaeology unit. And so when we put them on display for the boards, they actually did a little bit of a write-up to help explain to people what they were seeing. So I think it was about a 3-page write-up that they did for that. But it wasn't publicized, but it was made available. And so we could make it available if anybody is interested in seeing that.
Okay, great. Well, we got through all of the questions. There was a comment, thank you for a really great and thorough presentation. So we really appreciate you all being with us today. Any last comments or from the group?
No, we just appreciate you allowing us to share a little bit about the project. A lot of us spent a long time of our last couple of years on this project, so it's great to showcase it, and we're excited to see it built.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Everyone online, we have a lunch break, and then we will start back here at McKimmon Center at 1:30 for Raleigh BRT. I will see you at 1:30. Thank you all again. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.